it's funny because when we were discussing this theme, I had mentioned maybe possibly doing it without green. And so like going into the deck building process, I was like, oh, maybe I'll try it without green. That it's impossible. Spring without green is makes no sense.
Spring without green, and then doing it as as singleton. Oh no, there was a chance I could have done it using four ofs in the other colors, but I mean, I would have been stretching the theme really bad.
Yeah,
and
it's funny because I had built a complete deck once I had given into it being green, and then remembered as soon as I finished the deck that we had said singleton. So
the impressive part is that I felt like I really struggled to find cards related to the theme, and yet I think based on what I've seen, I believe we may only have a couple of cards that are overlap, and even
Absolutely.
then I don't think that even that is probably not.
You know what? Let's get right into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Hello, and welcome to Temple of the False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I am Bruce.
Welcome to episode 60. It's our 60 card spectacular finale.
Man,
it's season 6 finale.
Yeah,
episode 60.
Episode 60. Funny how that worked out.
It's funny that maybe somebody planned it that way. As you heard earlier, as you heard last week, I mean, every season we do a deck build at the end of the season. How many times can I say season? But that's our theme, is the season of spring. We build decks around a theme. This season, this season is spring, or this theme is spring. It's 60 card and singleton.
Yes.
That's like that was as much as we went on. And we came up with some pretty drastically different decks. I will be honest, some of the cards in here are because I typed in to Scryfall Spring, or Oracle Spring, or Flavor Spring. But hey, it helped.
Well, when we get around to discussing my deck, I will release my my secret tech for finding cards.
Oh,
yeah, super secret.
Yeah. What did you think about this process? Did you enjoy? Are you excited about this deck?
The funny part is the idea that you had built a deck and had forgotten that we were doing singleton. Mm-hmm. You weren't the only one. I started building the deck and started putting stuff together, and I was just pulling cards and discovered that, okay, I'm just going to keep saying it, discovered that E6, because I'm not saying Essex, E6 really fit the theme of an idea that I had, and I was starting to put this together with multiple copies of E6 and multiple copies of creatures that that made tokens, and I had other ways to sort of do other things, and it was interesting. And then I realized, wait, this has to be singleton. Okay, so let's back this up. Now, can I still do this whole E6 idea? I looked around for other cards that would fit the theme, that would do something even close to what E6 does, and it's just not there. So I'm like, okay, so I'm not going to warp the entire deck around trying to find this one card. So junked it and basically went on a new path.
It's almost as if we shouldn't have done singleton. But hey.
I would say yes, but I would also say that, for the last 10 weeks, folks have been seeing us put together decks, and a lot of times our decks are revolving around one card. And with 60 card, you can do that. You put in multiple copies, and then you sort of build the deck around that. And I wanted to show the idea of a deck list that's singleton. Because to me, a big joy of of 60 card casual is that you can really, obviously you can ramp the power level really high, but you can bring it way down. And I mean, for our group, our 60 card casual decks are not that strong. I mean, everybody, we all know roughly what we want for a power level. So you build, and if it's a little low, then you can, you hash it and you mess with some cards and you bring it, you have it creep up a little. And then we find that sweet spot and we're good to go. But I just wanted to show, the audience that we can, that 60 card casual decks do not have to be some 3-card combo where you're putting multiple copies of each of those cards. This can be something a lot more familiar to what people are used to seeing in a commander deck.
Yeah, and kind of as a send-off of the 60 card season, this is a really good starting point for a commander deck. If any of you are strictly commander players, then check out these deck lists. Add 20 cards to it, 20 non-land cards, add some lands, and you're good to go.
Right. I feel like I could take the deck list that I have right now, apply a commander to it, and then take the other, the remaining cards that I would be adding to the deck, and I can really focus them tightly on what that commander does. Because I think I've got a really strong base to begin with. I already have, the key ingredients that I expect to put in a commander deck. So at that point, it would just be add commander and spice. Yeah. And you get your results.
What I like about this too is that, like, you can play the deck probably a dozen times and then really start to see what works about the deck.
Right.
And then you can hone it in that way if you want to go away from the singleton idea.
Yeah.
You can see, like, what cards work better, what the deck needs more of, what really didn't do the thing you thought it would do.
That has always kind of been a joy for me with the singleton setup. I get to play a couple of games as singleton, and then eventually you play that, you're playing your deck and it's, this card is great. Well, then I want to focus in on that a little more. So now it stops being singleton because it doesn't have to be. I just chose to make it that way because it gives me more variety and I get to see how other cards work. Well, once I start to see how they work, then I can start to squeeze in. So, like Andy, looking at your deck, if you find that Gaia's Touch proves to be, or every time you play it, you're excited about it and it does something great and funky. Well, great. Now you know that, at some point when you decide you want to edit the deck or make some changes, you could, try putting 2 or 3 copies of Gaia's Touch in. So.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Andy, you want to talk about your deck?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah.
Something that kind of unintentionally came out of this was that without the lands, without the mana base, because, the way I see it, you can have... I've got a 3-color deck. I've got a green, white, black.
Okay.
Which is Abzan. It was originally just green and black. And so without the mana base, because I figure you can always just deal with just basics. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
Just kind of not an even split, but figure it out and do the math. It comes out to less than $50. So if any of you are interested by this deck list, it's relatively affordable. This is the first time I've given a deck a name. It's called I Can Smell the Wet Soil From Here, because I was inspired. I was inspired by this deck. I was inspired by building it. I was inspired, honestly, by the current weather. Maybe not today. Today's like 30 degrees for no reason.
Cold.
But recently it's been warming up. The ground's been thawing. You get that like musty, like dirt smell outside. I grew up fairly rural, so spring to me is mud, dirt, the smell of, like, you know, getting gross here, but, you know,
Yeah.
the roadkill thawing. But it was inspired by that, so I went, you know, oh, green black, that'll be great.
Nice.
Got all the way to the end of my non-singleton deck, realized I had added in a little bit of white, I think with Doran.
Ooh, Doran.
Because Doran kind of fits that, like, rustic charm of it all.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of where this deck came from. When I finally added white to it, I was like, I don't want to go too heavy into white. So really the only white there is Kolfanor, Doran, and Huatli. It's Huatli from War of the Spark.
Yeah.
So
the Sun's Heart.
Vigilance. Yeah. Each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. So it does, you know, the Doran thing.
Right.
But you don't even need white for that.
Yeah. You've also got Eerie Ultimatum.
I do. I was about to get there.
Okay.
And with those, it was kind of like, oh, I want value out of these my creatures dying or
right.
you know, being less than threatening. And then Eerie Ultimatum came in because I was like, oh, I've got white. This is great. And it does the roadkill kind of thing.
Yeah.
Eerie Ultimatum, for those who don't know, is green, black, white. So 7 mana for return any number of permanent cards with different names from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Nice.
The ultimate end game card, because I don't want this near the beginning of the game. I can't play it near the beginning of the game because I'm not going to have any white.
Right.
And you kind of go from there.
Mm-hmm.
Wait until you have the white.
I also like that it most likely is going to find a couple of lands, because between Evolving Wilds, Fabled Passage, Terramorphic Expanse, you probably have sacrificed a land. And this is looking for permanent cards with different names. So, yeah, sure, you're not going to be able to pull 2 forests out of your graveyard, but in theory, you're not going to have 2 forests in there anyway.
And the great thing with this, too, is that because we're playing a singleton deck, that's actually why I put it in here. I was like, oh, now it actually works real well because it's a singleton deck.
Right.
Every card other than basic lands, there's only one of. Also, on top of it, you know, I've got a single plains in there, because if I have a way to search for a basic land, I can go get my white.
Sure.
But I also have Overgrown Farmland and Wooded Bastion as kind of ways to also get white. Probably would want to put another plains in there if I really, really, really like can't wait for Kolfanor or Doran, but I think one is fine. Because this deck is built to kind of put everything in the graveyard, take out what I need. So I've got certain ways to mill myself, whether it's actual milling or other. I've got Cavalier of Thorns, which when it enters. I reveal the top 5 cards of my library, put a land from them onto the battlefield, and then put the rest of my graveyard, which is great.
Right.
And then when it dies, I can get something out of my graveyard on top of my library.
Yeah.
Deathbridge Chant. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of every turn, every one of my turns, beginning of my upkeep, I get a random card. If it's a creature, it goes on the battlefield. Random card from my graveyard. If it's a creature, it goes on the battlefield. Otherwise, it goes to my hand, which is great, because if it's a land, it goes to my hand. If it's a sorcery, it goes to my hand. If it's a creature,
right,
like there's zero like downfall to this, other than the fact that it's 6 mana and people will immediately kill it. My favorite in this whole deck so far, actually maybe in the whole deck, is Tend the Pests, which is from Strixhaven. It's a single green and a single black. It's 2 mana instant, and it says at the as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. Which, some of my favorite words. Create X 1/1 green, black and green pest creature tokens with when this creature dies, you gain 1 life, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. So you block with your huge thing. If it's about to die, you sacrifice it to this. You get a bunch of 1/1s that then you have a bunch of blockers. And then when they die, you get life. It's amazing. It is a fantastic card. Kind of also in the Strixhaven thing is infused with vitality. It is also an instant, also a single green and a single black. Until end of turn, target creature gains Death Touch, and when this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. You gain 2 life. This is kind of in the vein of things like Feign Death, or what's the other one? Unnatural. I got the word. Stamina. Unnatural stamina? Stamina. Jeez. Unnatural stamina.
He's right there.
First try. And it's great. And then Pest Infestation is some of my favorite removal in this deck. Green XX. Destroy up to X target artifacts and or enchantments. Create twice X 1/1 pests that gain you life when they die.
Nice.
Which is fantastic. What else?
What got what earned Valentin Dean of the Vein a spot in the deck?
It's funny because I saw this card and I was like, it has you kind of exile stuff rather than having it go to the graveyard. But if you turn it over, Lisette, Dean of the Root, is actually probably what you'd play 95% of the time. She says she's a 4/4 for 2 green, which is fairly easy. A 4/4 for 4 is fine. Like, it's pretty good. Whenever you gain life, you may pay 1. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and those creatures gain trample until end of turn.
Nice.
So
that works well with that 10 the pests.
Yeah, it's great. If you have a way to sacrifice things, which I don't think I put any in this deck, then you can sacrifice a pest to make all your other pests bigger. And they also get trample, which is excellent. Pair that with Scoot Swarm. And your board is going to blow up.
Yep.
Scoot Swarm is notorious for overly large board states. And as long as you can attack with it, it will do you good. I know that most people, when they see Scoot Swarm, will try to immediately kill it. So, good luck. Reach of Branches. This was a cool thing that I found that I had never seen before. It's a 4 and a green tribal instant Tree Folk. So it's a Tree Folk instant. Put a 2/5 green Tree Folk Shaman creature token onto the battlefield. Sure. Whenever a forest enters the battlefield under your control, you may return it from your graveyard to your hand. So it has it's self-recurring. For 5, if you're holding up 5 mana for literally just no reason.
Yeah. Well, you don't even need to be holding it up. Just play it. Yeah. You get a 2/5 Tree Folk, which sounds underwhelming until you remember that Doran is also in this deck. But then
Doran,
the instant the instant Reach for Branches is going to sit in your graveyard immediately, and on your next turn you're probably dropping another forest and putting it right back into your hand. So you're not burning multiple cards to get multiple creatures. You're using one card to get creatures over and over again. So I like that.
Yeah. My recursion package is pretty straightforward, I guess, for this kind of dusky kind of, or musky kind of dusty smell that I felt the whole time building this deck. Antler Skulkin, I'd never heard of. It's a Scarecrow for 5 mana. It's a 3/3. Target white creature. Helps if you read the whole card. I was deciding between this and Cauldron of something.
Okay.
That also gives persist.
Yeah, I know which card you're talking about. I've used it before. Now, of course, I can't remember.
So now that I've read the card, I would probably go with the Cauldron.
Right.
Cauldron of Souls.
Yes.
Choose any number of creatures. Each of those creatures gain persist until end of turn. So that was the idea behind it. Didn't realize it said white. Bond of Revival, I think, is one of my favorite cards over the past couple of years for this type of effect. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste until the next turn. So it's not until the end of this turn. So, like, if you get a creature out that's got a tap ability, like, for, I don't know why Karandor is the first one I thought of.
Sure.
But
it has haste, so that's...
It has haste until your next turn. Not even until the end of turn, which is great. And then also just 5 mana to get a creature out is great.
Yeah.
Corpse Turn, I've seen do some pretty heavy lifting for a 2 mana instant. Mill 3 cards, return creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So early game, if you don't have anything in your graveyard and you want something in your graveyard, great.
Sure.
If you don't have any creatures in your graveyard, this deck has a lot of creatures you might end up with.
Sure. I mean, and the Corpse Turn is just it's fueling the Eerie Ultimatum.
Exactly. I liked Season of Renewal from the newest Kamigawa set. Choose one or both, either a creature or an enchantment, or both. This deck has it's got a great spread of enchantments between Abundance, Abundant Growth, Gaia's Touch, Leyline of Vitality, Sylvan Anthem, Primeval Bounty, Dormant Grove, Deathbridge. Maybe it has too many enchantments.
I don't think so.
But we kind of skipped over this one as in that list. Dormant Grove is from Crimson Vow. It's a 3 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of your combat, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Which, for 4 mana is... but because you're getting it at the beginning of every one of your combats, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
If you decide not to attack, that's fine. Then, if that creature has toughness 6 or greater, pretty easy to do in this deck.
Right.
Transform Dormant Grove. It transforms into, surprise, a creature. It's a 3/6 tree folk with vigilance. And it says, other creatures you control have vigilance, which is possibly one of my favorite evergreen mechanics. Which is nice flavorfully.
Yeah.
Because he's a tree, and it's evergreen.
Very cute.
It's an
Very cute.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Don't laugh too hard. But this deck, and it was very much like just this kind of warming, gross, slimy deck.
Growth from the muck.
Yeah. My ramp package is fine. I tried to keep it more on theme than actually good.
Yeah.
But I kind of really like Scaled Herbalist. Scaled Herbalist is kind of like there's an elf that does the same thing. It's a 1/3 for 1 and a green. You tap it, you put a land from your hand on the battlefield. Which, you got 24 lands, great. As a root channeler, I really like. For 5 and a green, it's a 4/6 with reach, which by itself is fine.
Yeah.
You can tap it to gain 2 life, and it says creature spells you cast cost X less to cast, where X is the amount of life you gained this turn.
Right. So even if you're only gaining the 2 life, that's still pretty good.
Yeah. You tap this, you're essentially adding 2 mana.
Yeah.
And what I really like about it is that, that kind of fuel, like, I think I also had 4 of this in my original deck.
Right.
That fueled a lot of the life gain ideas.
Yeah.
But you dig through this deck, you see a lot. Oh, it was that and Verdant Sun's Avatar, where I was like, life gain, yes, that's perfect for spring, but you kind of dig through this deck and you see a lot of synergies kind of come out in terms of putting lands down. Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, is one of my favorite cards of all time,
right?
And she just kind of, or they kind of just bring new life to each of your non-token creatures, because then you can be able to tap them for green, which is why there's so many green pips everywhere on this deck. But also I've got 14 forests.
Yeah.
So any questions?
Not particularly. I think I like the layout. I like the setup of the deck.
Yeah. I really, as you can tell, because I have been talking straight for the past 10 minutes, I really like this deck. I really enjoyed building it. I think I've always wanted to build some sort of Golgari deck and just haven't.
Mm-hmm.
And even just as the non-singleton that I had before, I was like really impressed with the card selection based in the theme,
right,
of this like grimy, gross, like smelly. One of the cards that I had originally found to kind of really dig into that loamy
Life of the Loam
feeling. No, so I was thinking of putting Life in the Loam in there, but it is expensive.
Yeah,
and I was like, nah. But Fungal Rebirth. Return target permanent from your graveyard to your hand. If a creature died this turn, create 2 1/1 green saplings. That's exactly what I want to do every time I play Magic.
Right.
It's a 3-mana instant that if something of yours dies, play this afterwards, and then you get it back to your hand and get some value out of it. And it's helpful if, somebody kills, say, Doran on your turn, or on their turn. So they're like, all right, I'm going to play this sorcery to kill Doran and then attack you. You can play Fungal Rebirth, get Doran out of the graveyard, and have 2 blockers. It's great. It's like a nice little combat trick.
Nice. Was there a card you didn't put in the deck just because you couldn't make it fit the theme, or was it just you started with the cards that fit the theme and then sort of swung down from there?
Yeah, that was kind of
okay.
More of what happened. There were a few cards that I was like, ooh, maybe, but I think I always ended up finding similar effects on thematic cards. Nothing really sticks out at this moment.
Right.
But definitely some ramp and definitely some recursion. I was like, like Animate Dead doesn't make sense in this deck. That type of thing, where it's like, it makes sense as a card for this deck, but thematically doesn't make sense.
No, Animate Dead, that's a fall or winter card.
Yeah, exactly. All Hallows Eve also didn't put in this deck.
No.
Because that's not spring.
So, no, Andy, I like the deck. I think, I like where this is going.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited. It's fairly inexpensive to build. I think I might build it. Just like when the last time we did 60 card decks with Lord of Tressorhorn. Maybe I'll build this one too.
Right.
But I've done so much talking. We're gonna throw this over to our sponsor so that they can do some talking and I can get some water. And when we come back, we got a cool deck made by Bruce. That's you.
Spring has sprung, baby. Spring has sprung.
Spring has sprung.
This episode of Temple of Falls Pod is brought to you by Natural Spring. Hey, who wouldn't want to gain 8 life? Well, maybe you don't want to pay the 5 now, but 8 life! And besides, Susan Van Camp image art is just wonderful. Natural spring. Back to you, Andy.
Oh, welcome
Hey.
back to our Season 6 finale, episode 60, 60 card spectacular. Man, I'm so excited for spring. We're mostly halfway through spring.
Yeah.
I am excited for it. I'm excited to go on walks and excited to, I was going to say smell flowers, but not really because allergies. Also, I live in the middle of the city.
Yeah, spring is hay fever season, or at least it used to be hay fever season for me. I'm one of the lucky ones who had it terrible when I was a kid and kind of grew out of it. So now spring isn't quite so bad for me, but you know,
maybe when I'm your age, I'll grow up.
Still not a big supporter of pollen.
Yeah, no.
I get it.
I rarely get my wife flowers because of this. It's a good season. It's not the best season.
No, not even close.
But you know what is the best season? Season 6 of Temple of False Pod. It's about to end. Bruce, bring us home with your beautiful green spring deck.
Yes. Okay, so my deck, unlike Andy's, has no name at all. I just named it Spring because that's basically what it was.
Not even an exclamation point.
No.
Spring.
Spring. So when I decided to build the deck, I decided the last couple of themes, I've been on theme mostly. You know, yeah, sure, that fits the theme, Bruce. This time around, I said, no. This time, theme all the way, all the time. So every single card in this deck is somehow tied to spring. So now I'm going to share my secret for finding these cards. Shh, it's Scryfall.
No.
Basically, I did what everybody expects. I searched for spring. I searched for rebirth. I searched for leaf. I searched for bloom. I searched for growth. And I didn't just do it in the titles. I also did it in the flavor text. So I managed to sneak a bunch of cards in there.
Nice.
So I piled all those cards up and then started whittling them down, figuring how I wanted to do this deck, what I wanted the deck to do. And in the end, this deck is, I guess it's a weak elf deck, but it holds hard to theme. So
good.
Not surprisingly, in a deck that's focused on spring and everything you talk about spring with growth and rebirth and everything like that, the ramp package is extensive in this deck because, hey, ramp is all about growth. So it turns out a big chunk of your cards are going to be able to allow you to search for land, give you mana, do something like this because that's sort of the way it goes. So I have loosely 12 cards in the ramp package, and I don't know that I would necessarily call this a ramp. I mean, I've listed them under ramp, but honestly, Nyx Bloom Ancient is listed in here as a ramp, as part of ramp, but it costs 7. This is not ramp.
Right.
This is something else. So I included it in ramp because it does increase the amount of mana that you make, but practically speaking, it's not really that. So of the ramp package, some of them are ones that you have definitely heard of. I mean, a lot of us have run Springleaf Drum. I just mentioned Nyx Bloom Ancient. And then there's some of the other ones like Heartbeat of Spring. Carpet of Flowers is an oldie but a goodie. And it definitely fits with the theme. And then some of them are a little more off the beaten path. So like Bloom Tender. It's a 1/1 elf, taps, and it taps, and for each color among permanents you control, add 1 mana of that color to your mana pool. Now, normally in a deck like this, you would just cut it. This deck is almost entirely green. The only white in the deck comes from hybrid. So at best, this card will produce 2 mana. But I looked at it and said, you know what, it taps, even if it taps for just one, I'll take one. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I mean, how do you fit theme better than Bloom Tender? I mean, come on.
Right.
So the other one I liked was Rites of Spring. Discard any number of cards in your hand, search your library for that many basics, reveal them, and put them into your hand. So
I love that card.
Yeah. Talk about fixing a lot of mistaken hands that you probably shouldn't have kept. With Rites of Spring, I'm going to keep a 2-land hand if it has rights in it. I mean, it just guarantees that I'm going to get all the land that I need. So
I had that card in my deck at one point. I don't know what made me get rid of it because it belongs in my deck.
Sure, especially in a deck with multiple colors, because then you can search out the basics that you want.
I can search out my planes and feed into my recursion, especially my Eerie Ultimatum.
Right.
Because I can just dump my whole hand, find 7 basics, and get on with my life.
One of my other favorites is Vernal Bloom. Whenever a forest is tapped for mana, its controller adds green to his or her mana pool. Now, most people don't run this because it means everybody's forest adds a green, not just you. So there's a lot of people see that as the downside. Why run it? And besides, it is an older card. It costs 4 mana. I get all that, but come on, Vernal Bloom. I mean, it so fits theme. And yes, I mean, my deck is entirely green, so it means that every single land is probably going to be tapping for at least 2 green.
Yeah, I mean, like, it benefits you more significantly than literally anybody else, because chances are nobody's doing mono green. So, like, say everybody has 10 lands out.
Right.
9, if not 10 of them for you are going to be forests, because you have 23 forests in a Springjack pasture. For everybody else, maybe at most 4 of them are going to be forests. So, like, sure, you're helping them a little,
right?
But also, like, what's the problem with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I mean, this is we're talking casual decks. It's fun. My personal favorite of the ramp package is Spirit of the Season. This is a 3/3 Treefolk Spirit. It costs 1, a green and a green, and it says when it enters the battlefield, it gains haste. If it's summer, put a +1/+1 counter on it. If it's autumn, you gain 3 life. If it's winter, but more importantly for us, if it's spring, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. And yes, I know, technically it's not ramp, but come on. I mean, this is spectacular. I love this.
Absolutely.
And
it's great too.
It's also an uncard. So
yeah, I was gonna say I've never heard of this card before, and then I looked at it, and apparently it was only printed in unsanctioned.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that explains why I don't remember ever seeing it myself. So, so there we go. Either way, if I wasn't so beholden to the theme, I would definitely run fewer ramp cards and more other things. But I did find that trying to stay as true to the theme as I could, it meant that the ramp package was going to be a little bigger. So if you're looking to copy my deck, then I would recommend perhaps reducing the ramp package a little bit and focusing that on other areas of the deck. So beyond that, I've got for card draw, Gilt Leaf Seer, Grim Flowering, Nature's Resurgence, Shaman of Spring, and Verdant Rebirth are all here.
They're all very lovely names.
They all work really well. Now, admittedly, a lot of the card draw in this is not multiple. So, like Verdant Rebirth, you play it, it does something, and draw a card. Shaman of Spring, when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. So unless you have a way to make that, make it enter the battlefield repeatedly, this isn't really, it's not amazing card draw. Nature's Resurgence, I mean, Nature's Resurgence is nice. You do have to keep in mind that if your graveyard is not particularly packed, you're probably handing over a lot of cards to your opponent. But, again...
It'd be good in my deck to find that Eerie Ultimatum.
Right. And I love the name. I love the card. So,
yeah.
And if you're looking for something a little more specific, Grim Flowering, we draw a card for each creature in your graveyard. So you can make that work. Admittedly, that one's 6 mana. That's you are going to need a lot of mana for that. But obviously, my deck is going to ramp like crazy. So I don't think that's going to be too difficult. So, and Guiltleaf Seer doesn't draw you your cards, but it acts as a mini Sensei's Divining Top. So for green and tap it, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put them back in any order. So you're always getting the best of the top 2 cards. So I like that idea, and hey,
yeah, you can always, if you find a card that you don't want for a while, you can just keep putting it as the second card.
Right. So one of the other things I was looking for was removal. But unfortunately, how do you find cards that destroy other cards yet fit the theme of spring? It wasn't particularly easy. So my removal package is pretty much exclusively just artifact and enchantment removal. I've got Break Asunder. I believe Break Asunder is in there mostly because the flavor text the flavor text on one of the versions of the card fits. And unfortunately, of course, Architect has saved the wrong one for me, but that's all right. Essence Filter, destroy all enchantments, or destroy all non-white enchantments. I mean, for 1 a green and a green, it's a sorcery. It takes it all out. I like that.
I like Spring Cleaning.
Spring Cleaning, yeah.
Because it's thematic, obviously, because spring. But also, like, it is very... It's a multiplayer card. It's nice.
Yeah, and the idea that destroy target enchantment, and then if you clash, you destroy all of their enchantments. That is harsh. You're really going to make somebody pay if they happen to flip that land in their deck.
Yeah.
So
if they have a lot of enchantments, like my deck.
So the other one I liked was Spring Sage Ritual. For 3 and a green, destroy target artifact or enchantment, you gain 4 life. So just a little extra bonus in there. I thought it worked out well. Something else my deck has the sub theme is that is elves. There are a lot of elves in the deck. There are elves in most of the art. So I leaned into that a little bit. Wiltleaf Liege, again, tying into the whole leaves and budding and blooming aspect. Other green creatures you control get +1/+1. Other white creatures you control get +1/+1. In case you're wondering, there is only one other white creature in this deck. There is a card that can produce white creatures, but honestly, you're not running Wiltleaf Liege to help along with your 0/1 goats. More importantly, if a spell or an ability an opponent controls causes you to discard Wiltleaf Liege, put it onto the battlefield instead of putting it into your graveyard. So you can really punish people for trying to mess with your hand. Sylvan Anthem. Andy, I believe this one's in your deck as well. And with good reason. I mean, it just makes sense. Whenever a green creature enters the battlefield under your control, scry 1. I have a number of token producers that I'll talk about in a minute. And that will allow me to scry pretty deep if I want, I think.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Eladamri, Lord of Leaves. All elves gain Forest Walk, so there's a little bonus there, and the elves cannot be the target of spells or abilities. So, again, we're just adding a little more to it. I will say, I wasn't looking at price when I picked these cards. Last I checked, Eladamri somewhere around $80 to $90. You may want to take a pass on this one, but I threw it in there. He fits the theme, so it just made sense to leave him in. And then there's Dwynen, Guiltleaf Dane. It has reach. Other elves get +1/+1, and when it attacks, you gain 1 life for each attacking elf you control. So you'll gain a little bit of life there. So yeah, I have a token section, and for the most part, these cards are, they fit the theme. But I will say that an earlier version of the deck was really looking for token creatures, and I moved away from that just because it wasn't really working. However, I like these cards well enough that I wanted to keep them in the deck in spite of that. So there's Guiltleaf Ambush, which again lets me clash with an opponent to give my creatures the tokens that it makes death touch until the end of the turn. There's Nissa Worldwaker. Target land becomes a 4/4 elemental creature, and it also gives you the option to untap forests, and you can even search your library for a number of basics and put them into play, although you're probably never hitting the ultimate with this one. Wolfcaller's Howl. Yeah, it's an enchantment that at the beginning of your upkeep, create X 2/2 green wolf creature tokens, where X is the number of opponents with 4 or more cards in hand. I just love this card. It was something I don't think I'd ever seen it before. Here's a card that basically says to your opponents, play with your hands empty, or I get more stuff. And if it means that when you play out those extra wolves, you get to scry a little deeper. They're green, so they're probably going to be getting a +1/+1/+1/+1 on top of them at some point relatively soon. And this happens on each of your upkeeps. So this turn, again the next turn, again the next turn. I mean, I expect that in a 4-player game, I'm probably getting 1 or 2 of these 2/2 wolves every single turn. And I think that's going to be. I think this is a card that's going to show up in some other decks that I have, because the ability to just get creatures that easily without spending any mana. This is going to happen. So,
yeah.
And the other token producer is Jade Mage. For 3 mana, you can put a 1/1 green sapling creature token onto the battlefield. Wish it was an elf, but that's fine.
She doesn't need haste for it, though.
No, she doesn't need haste for it, and more importantly, with the amount of ramp that's in this deck, you can also activate Jade Mage over and over again. So if you've got 6, 9, 12, 15 mana, you can activate it that many, as much as, for every 3 mana, you can make another Sapperling, and you can do it at the end of your opponent's end step, and just tap out whatever mana you have left. And I love having places to do mana dumps, especially for green, where quite often you get a pile of mana and then you end up with a hand where you just can't seem to use it all. So I like having mana dumps in there every once in a while.
Yeah, especially where, you've got Vernal Bloom and you've got Heartbeat of Spring, so
right.
You've got ways to make even Nyx Bloom Ancient. You've got ways to make a ridiculous amount of mana. And the crazy thing, or the absurd thing with those cards, is that they build off each other.
Right.
So with Heartbeat of Spring, it's you make an additional one. So your Forest taps for 2, and then with Nyx Bloom Ancient, it would tap for 6,
right?
Type of thing. That's so much mana.
Yeah, and when that happens, if you've already at that point, you probably already have 8 lands out. So if 8 lands and they're each tapping for 6 mana, well, now you're at 48 mana. There's just no way you're going to be using all that unless you have a mana dump. And Jade Mage, with all it would take would be 42? 42 mana, and you've got quick math, 14. Yeah, 14 1/1 Sapperlings. I'll take that. The final piece here really is a section I titled "Really Big," because when it comes down to it,
these are your win cons.
These are the win cons. The rest of this deck is either sorceries, instants, or creatures that just aren't that big, that they're just not going to get through as the game progresses. My bigger creatures, I think, are 4/4s. So even with the ways to pump creatures, a 5/5 with no evasion is not really going to get through. That's not realistic. Right. So
unless you have a lot of them.
Unless you have a lot of them, yes. So I thought I would throw in some really big stuff. So Beastmaster Ascension's in here.
Classic.
Ixali's Keeper.
Oh.
You can sacrifice it, and target creature gets +5/+5 and trample until the end of the turn. Now, it costs 8, and you have to tap it and sack it. So this card is definitely in here because it fits the theme.
Yeah, it's kind of definitely like a what's the word I'm looking for? Like a finisher.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to use this unless either you desperately need to or it will win you the game.
Right.
Or, I mean, take somebody out.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and the remaining one is Prodigious Growth. For 6 mana, it's an aura. Creature gets +7/+7 and has trample. Now, we all have better... There are better ways to get these kinds of things, but they just don't fit the theme. Whereas this one definitely fits the theme. So I threw it in there.
Yeah, I love that card.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you know, since Alpha, we've had things like Giant Growth.
Yeah.
And finally, in M19, they stapled Trample onto it.
Right, and that's part of the reason why Giant Growth isn't in this deck.
Yeah.
You know, making your 4/4 into a 7/7 is cute, but without the evasion, it's still getting blocked by a 1/1. So it needed something, and so that's where I went with that. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate how much this deck leans on its theme without being like an elf ball deck. Like so many elf decks out there are just like, all right, like you put an elf out and it gets you another elf, and then your elf does an elf thing and elf, and voila, everyone's dead. But this really does do the polleny kind of like spring thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's an elf deck, but it's not an elf deck. It's an elf deck like a night deck is a night deck.
Right.
You know, the creatures are primarily elves, but you're not sacking elves to get more elves. You're not using elves to ramp you into something huge. It's just they're elves. They just are. There are a lot of them here. Let's make that count for something. So
yeah, there's definitely like some cards in here that I'm like, oh, these are great cards, and then there's some cards in here that I've never seen before that I'm like, ooh, like I said earlier, Spring Cleaning. I'm like, oh, I really like that as enchantment removal. I like that it's not just pay 1 and a green to destroy target enchantment. It does a thing. Right. It does a thing beyond the thing you need it to do, which just makes it interesting. What else? I mean, to an extent, Spring Sage Ritual does the same. Like, it does a similar thing where it, you know, you've got the flexibility for it to also target an artifact, but it also gains you 4 life, which is a thing. It's not great, but like, it fits the theme. It does a little bit extra. This is up my alley.
Yeah. And like I said, every card fits the theme, whether it's in the title, whether it's in the flavor text, or I think Beastmaster Ascension was the only one where I looked at it and said, it just is spring to me. The idea of the ascension and you know, being alive and all this kind of thing. So
I mean, you look at the card and you're like, those are spring colors.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I should mention the land package: 24 basic forests, 1 spring, or 23 basic forests, 1 spring jack pasture, and it's there because, well, there's spring in the name, and it fits with the deck list. I don't know how many times I'm going to want to spend 4 mana to put an 0/1 white goat on the battlefield. Then
that goat is a 1/2.
Well, that with the Wiltleaf Liege, that could certainly happen. And then you can sack X goats to add X mana of any one color to your mana pool. You gain X life, which is really what you're doing. You're gaining the life because you're not accumulating these goats so that you can sack them for mana.
Yeah, you got to start early with that. You really got to start early with this, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I loved this exercise. I love this exercise every season. I feel like leading up to it, I'm always like kind of dreading it just because I'm like, oh, I got to do work. But like when I finally start and then like the inspiration strikes, like it always feels so good to like have a deck at the end where I'm like, oh, all right, yeah. And like even if I don't ever build it, it's always nice to like look at like certain synergies, certain cards that I wouldn't have thought of before. I feel like this season in particular, I really leaned. I really leaned into the theme on this one, and I mean it was pretty easy with Golgari, but I think it was excellent to see these cards that I've never seen before, giving me ideas for other decks. Or how to turn this into commander deck, or I mean whatever. I mean I think that was the cool thing with both of these is that I mean legendary creatures are so ubiquitous at this point that it was inevitable that each of us were going to have at least one in our deck. In obviously in color, but we also ended up with one. I mean, like yours is obviously a mono green deck. Mine is 3 color. I ended up with a couple that could helm a possible commander deck.
Right.
I mean, I could have it be Kolfinor, I could have it be Doran, which is great because then I can take this. I can add, like I said, 20 cards to it, 20 non-lands and 20 lands or so, ish. Figure it out from there and build a commander deck,
right.
Or I can figure out what cards I want more of, weed out some weaker ones, and figure out how to make this a quote-unquote proper 60-card deck. Or I can just be like, hey, this is my spring deck. I'm going to build it for a few months. Or play it for a few months, and fall hits, and I get rid of it.
Right. What I really enjoyed out of this was, primarily for me, it was I got a chance to see some cards that I either hadn't seen for a very long time. So like Essence Filter, this is a card that I could be running in more decks. It's fairly inexpensive, and the idea that that it will destroy all enchantments with the right deck in the right place, that I think that card just makes sense. The other one was a card that I hadn't, and I mentioned it already, Wolfcaller's Howl. I appreciate this cost 4 mana, and maybe I'm overestimating how many tokens I'm going to get off of this thing. But honestly, I think if you get 2/2/2 creatures, you just hit your break even. So I don't think it's that difficult. I mean, this card just needs to sit there until your next upkeep, and then I think you're probably getting those 2/2 creatures. There aren't that many decks that want to run holding a hand that's under 4, and this is not going to be a deterrent for anybody to make sure their hand gets under 4, or else Bruce is going to get a 2/2 wolf token. Oh no! But like I said, in the right deck, I think that this could be very interesting. I think there are all kinds of options there. I like getting free tokens.
Yeah, I'm excited. I got to figure out what I have from these cards, and then maybe I'll build this deck. But this is how I always feel after doing this.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try to find my old list that was non-singleton and see if that works. But I think that's gonna do it for us for this season. Yeah,
I think so.
Normally between seasons we take a 2-week break, but we've got some momentum. I think I'm feeling good about this season. I kind of want to. We're gonna have some mini sods, mini eps between seasons. We're still gonna take a 2-week break from our like main 10-week thing that we do. You'll see. I'm not gonna give it away too much.
We got some ideas. We got some ideas.
You'll be excited because we'll be excited, and now we've got more Temple of the False pod, where our decks are not optimized. I think I just heard a wolf outside. Our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
I'm Bruce.
You must have more than 4 cards in hand.
Oh no.
That's what's happened.
I gotta run away. I'll see all of you next week for our first special episode of Temple of the False Pod. Thank you again so much for listening. Happy 60 episodes. Go play some 60 card. And may your 5th land be a card that neither of us put in our deck. The Temple.
Bye!
Wait. Before you go, I just wanted to say thank you for listening. You can reach out to us via email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com or on Twitter at falsepodmtg. Bruce is at Manaburned, and I'm at Andy Weekend, though you'll definitely notice I use the podcast Twitter far more often. Now that we've got you here, make sure you subscribe, like, rate us on whatever podcast platform you use. It helps us out. It gets us more reach. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Like a video there. Leave some comments for more casual enjoyment. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with some more timeless discussions about all things casual. So come hang out, and may your 5th land be the Temple. Bye-bye. Should I do my best, Bruce? Bye!